Hi, everybody. This is Mark DiTargiani. I'm with Pacific Western Bank, and we are a bank focused on helping startups grow and get to the next stage. We've been working with Andrew and 7BC for years now. Andrew and I go back a decade and a half at this point, and I've always respected the fact that he's a thought leader in the space and somebody that you can learn an awful lot. And he kind of opens up that window a little bit into VC and what's happening in the back room. So we're excited to be partnering with Andrew on his podcast here at Pacific Western Bank. We focus on helping startups get to the next level. We offer a startup services program for companies that are the pre-A, which includes some free banking and some high yield interest rates. And then when companies raise an A round, then we start moving into treasury management services and then venture debt. And we believe that we're one of the leaders in the venture debt market because we are flexible and we can do custom packages and we don't just do off the shelf type of term sheets. So enjoy the podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to learn some things and we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, Mark. And anybody who needs an introduction, happy to share your information with them. Just get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with Mark. Thanks so much for supporting and sponsoring the pod. Hello, and welcome to Fireside with a VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and I'm very excited to have Dan Harvey, Vice Chair of CBRE in San Francisco, back on the podcast. Dan actually was the second person to go on my little nascent podcast here, so it's good to check in on 18, almost 24 months later. When Dan came on the podcast the first time, it was something like March, April of 2000 when we were all just going into work from home. And so it was an interesting conversation at the time. Since then, obviously a lot of things have changed. CBRE is, for anyone who doesn't know, is the world's largest commercial real estate firm in the world. So Dan sits in the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, and every major startup that becomes a major tech titan like a Google, Facebook, interacts and relies on CBRE for, real estate solutions in, their locality, but in just every country around the world. So much has changed. I mean, first of all, to introduce Dan a bit more, full disclosure, Dan has been a limited partner in multiple funds of ours, including our latest fund. So we have lots of intellectual conversations, kind of sharing information from who's growing in the real estate side, how it's changing, what's going on with geography from his perspective. In ours, he's also a board member. On his LinkedIn title, it says board member delivering dynamic workplace for innovation companies, a force multiplier for talent density and vibrant culture. This begins to give you some insight into Dan's not thinking about square footage and where to put the kegulator to drive culture and innovation. It's a bit more than that. The topic is one every founder should pay attention to, as success is all about execution and the world has changed from COVID. How can companies attract and retain talent in a talent war? How can startups or corporates get the best results from their teams? Failing to retain talent is something I've become increasingly more aware of as I work with our CEOs. I've had some CEOs tell me that they realized later that losing people that were key hires was slowing down the progress of their products and just the entire company. So I think this is essential. You could argue this is more important than funding or fundraising. How can young people start their careers right out of undergrad if they're in a work from home environment? I can't imagine, looking back at how I was working in physical teams, that would work. So this is Dan's job, and he's a true academic intellectual on these topics. So excited to take a deep dive with him. We're also going to get into what Dan calls WaaS, or Workplace as a Service. And we're going to get into specifics of what that means. And this is what I think is so important for startups and investors to pay attention to. When we spoke last, Dan was saying, money's not free anymore. EBITDA matters. Productivity matters. Is it cheaper to build the best mix of technology in-house or outsource some of this? So it almost becomes like many of the startups that we invest in. If you pay for the software on an annual basis, that's cheaper than the one or multiple people you would have had to have hired to do what the software is doing. And yet the software is better than those people because these guys specialize. So Dan, thanks for coming back. Great to see you again. Maybe before we get into the specifics of workplace as a service and what CBRE has mandated you and your team to do on developing solutions that face the new startups, maybe give us a little bit of context. We all know what COVID-19 is, but maybe give us a little context of what's changed in the Bay Area and around the world.
Yeah, well, first of all, Andrew, thanks for having me back, and it's an honor and a privilege to join you again. You know, you are truly one of my blue flame thinker peeps that I love riffing with, and I like to think, you know, I have strong opinions, but very loosely held. And COVID has been one of the moments where you realize how loosely held your opinions need to be. So look, we chatted, back in, I think it was March, April of 2020, and that was just the beginning moment of my what I call pandemic induced fever dreams that had some flying monkeys. And then I found myself in a clown car of derangement, trying to figure out, wow, what is it that I going to do or say that I do, given what has happened. And so I also sort of started realizing, boy, I'm probably only going to get one pandemic, I hope, in my life, but let's not let it go to waste.
Right. Never let a pandemic go to waste.
Yeah, never. Yeah, I didn't make that up, but I heard it, and I'm like, you know what? That makes sense. And I also remember early days. I happened to be in a small group where I got to spend some time chatting with Stuart Butterfield, you know, the CEO of Slack, and I just remember him saying, this was so important at the moment. You know, it's like, hey, Dan, imagine if COVID wasn't biological, but it was digital. Imagine you could go into the office and have Taco Tuesday and high five and do all the things you love about being together in an office, but you were digitally shut down. And it just caused me to pause and go, oh my goodness, that would be, for not all businesses, but so many businesses, absolutely destructive.
Yeah, websites down, downtime, data center nuked. Yeah,
all the stuff that business models are built around, you know, a digital model. So anyway, it was just like, wow, I really need to rethink what is workplace, right? What is it? And so that has, I think, forever changed the way I think about workplace. And traditionally from CBRE, you know, you think of CBRE as delivering office workplace to our clients, which.
And Dan, before we go deeper, just there must be someone here who's not familiar with CBRE, although I would think that's a real minority. Just real fast, who is CBRE in general?
Yep.
And maybe even what you used to do. I don't want to interrupt your flow here.
Yeah. So CBRE was birthed, okay, in 1906. Okay, so you talk about going back in time, and it's obviously changed a lot for it to even have survived that long. It's been pretty darn good at adapting to the changes. You know, you think about World War I, I mean, you just go through all the stuff that has happened to get to where we are. But it is the world's largest by a 3x factor. I'll just call it global workplace platform, delivering workplace globally. But traditionally, think of that as delivering physical office workplace, and obviously industrial and life science. I mean, not just office, but my particular focus has been on delivering the office workplace for, and then again, my area has really been around technology companies, that sector. Think Web 2 and Web 3 type companies. So that's what it does. It does it globally, and it has a transactional component, but it also has an advisory consulting component. It does facilities management. We have a lot of our teams are embedded in large companies doing the on the ground management of the operations of a physical office building. So anyway, high level.
And can I say, like, having had a bunch of startups myself, I remember not being happy about it. We were growing quickly. VCs were throwing money at us. We probably had like 50, 60 million of VC funding, and we were dealing with office space. We had a 10,000 square foot office space and we paid money for an option to move into some other office space. So we were paying money just for an option to take some other. And I was thinking, aren't we being sold some financial product here? Like, is this a bad idea? And we came around to doing it. We did it because, and in the very beginning, if you're an unproven startup and you go to rent a tiny office space in New York City or San Francisco, the landlord says, well, you're not since 1906. I need 18 months rent paid up front because I don't know if you're good for it. And that's a horrible use of your angel funding or friends and family rounds. So real estate really is one of the key puzzle parts that go with, raising money when your stock is cheap, building some value, raising more money when your stock is more expensive. And the real estate part is a total part of it. So they're completely intertwined. And that's how you and I know each other.
Yep. They're intertwined, and they're really in conflict with one another in this particular way. And I'll just call it the atoms to bits or bytes. Like if you think about real estate, it's physical, it's atoms, right? And the ownership view, the institutional ownership of real estate is long-term commitments, right? Predictable cash flow, credit worthiness. All of that gets into the underwriting, which is why you just went through some of the business terms that were put to you, and you're like, that doesn't in any way align with what I'm doing or what I'm investing in, which is a lot of companies building software and using digital, right, building their business models, and so. And that moves fast and quick. And real estate transactions have been long and slow and expensive. And so there's just an inherent conflict and collision of those two things. And so that's really what the pandemic, I mean, this was happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic has really just put an exclamation point about the big reveal of these inconsistencies, which is why you saw pre-pandemic the WeWorks of the world, and then the Industrious is this whole thing of what we call agile space. So that's all part of trying to make atoms real estate more liquid and flexible. So anyhow, so as I started really wrestling with this and taking what Stuart Butterfield had said to heart, it really got me to thinking about the cultures, the different cultures we see in our companies. And you can sort of think about a Wall Street culture, which is more of a declarative culture, leadership having the sort of political social capital to tell its workforce, you shall do this, you shall do that, you shall come in and work 100 hours a week, however that's told, but culturally you will come into the office 5 days a week, right? So, that still exists. I mean, it's changed, but that's still there. So I call that declarative culture. And then you have what I call Web 2 culture, which is, let's call it more woke culture in terms of just what that's like. And you're not going to see the leadership of those companies declaring thou shalt do. It's more of a nudging culture, right?
I mean, this is the talent war. I mean, it used to be,
and the talent war
everybody
is
saw the
central.
movie Wall Street in the 80s, and we were willing to. My first job made me stay in the office until 10:30 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Yep.
So 10:30 p.m. was, 4:59 whistle blow. I get to get out of here.
Yep.
Whereas in the talent war in Silicon Valley, it's hard to imagine being that declarative to the kind of the royal employees.
Yep. And you just exactly. And so you couldn't recruit the talent if you were that declarative. And even now, in the midst of what some people will talk about, sort of the Patagonia vest knowledge worker recession, you're still. I mean, that's what will be the interesting thing to play out, is how much more I'll call it on the spectrum of declarative does executive leadership get in the sort of the nudging business with talent. And so I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I mean, it's an interesting equation. And then you have, Web 3, which by nature is decentralized culture, more personal sovereignty, Do they use physical office space? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at a Coinbase as an example. They absolutely have office, but the culture is more decentralized, and thus the workforce is more untethered, right? So in any event, those are our, I'll call it US, NATO cultures, right? European, we'll stay away from trying to characterize what China's, China obviously is more authoritarian culture, but so anyway, that really led me to think, okay, well, how is it? What is it that I now need to think about what I do? And what I realized, and you just brought it up, Andrew, is I'm really not in the office business anymore. I'm really in the business of how do I create workplace that generates deliberate collaboration, innovation, and productivity, or otherwise known as synergies, by meshing or even creating good collisions between a company's talent and their ideas that pull the future forward. So, that's a nice high level glowing statement, but I mean, that is what I do now. And I think about that a lot, like, okay, well, what does that really mean? And, these synergies, that's what, these coming together of talent and ideas to collaborate and innovate and have productivity, lead to building products and services that create, hopefully, for your businesses and investments, Andrew, stunning stakeholder value, right? And now, I'm going to say, we've realized that money's not free, and growth without EBITDA and margins is not, we've reverted to the mean, whatever you want to say, but we've got to have that. So margins and EBITDA have become an essential partner to growth and ARR, right? And so that just goes right back to, what you talked about, recruiting talent, retaining talent, right? How expensive it is to lose good talent, right? And avoiding the recurring OpEx of building internal, might be workplace teams, or that, what I'll call sort of the professional management class system or bureaucracy, particularly for young growing companies. I mean, obviously there's a certain amount of that as you scale that needs to become part of how you process work internally at a large company. But that's what we're really trying to get at.
Yeah, and Dan, I would jump in and say, when I think back to my own startups, and then I watch kind of more from a distance the startups that we invest in and work with, there's attract and retain talent, but develop talent is an important part. And I think that's a big part of what it looks like the substance of your workplace as a solution is. Obviously, you have to attract, you got to retain, but part of the magic of a really high producing startup is that you've got something that works, you've got a culture that's probably proliferating from the founders, and a new person comes into that company, and we turn that person into a US Marine and a total badass. So how do you turn that person into a Googler or a member of that team if they're completely remote and they're not using any tools and solutions to figure out how to create that interaction? I remember reading the Steve Jobs biography, and when he was building that one ellipse humongous building, I heard some pregnant lady was complaining she has to walk 11 minutes to get to the toilet.
Yeah.
And he was like, you're damn right. That was part of my design, to make sure sales and engineering bump into each other in the hallway or something like that. I'm simplifying it. But, there was thought, design, and pain that went into just one building to make sure that people were bumping into each other to create synergies and collision of, different cross matrix, whatever functions.
Yeah. I'm gonna take the Apple HQ there, and I'm gonna port it over to one of my favorite cities, and just take the analogy and tweak it slightly. Paris. Think Paris. Think the Champs-Élysées. Think about that roundabout. I mean, that is the greatest roundabout. In the world, right? And you think about how many roads intersect, and you're constantly, when you get there, and I've only driven it myself a couple times. I've had the courage to actually get in the car and try to navigate that. But you think about all the lanes of traffic and the quote, I'll call them collisions, but we're thinking good collisions, right? Life-giving collisions, right? And so that's what Jobs, when he was asking her to walk 11 minutes, was about having certain collisions, right, with or meshing of people and talent with ideas, right? So that's really, so I've now, back to sort of like, what does all this mean? It's me pivoting from real estate, or thinking about it as physical office space, as into what we call phygital workplace. It's physical and it's digital. So think about, yes, of course, it's still the office. It's home. It's agile space, like a WeWork or an Industrious, right? It's also experience space. You think about the things like a Convene is doing, or Salesforce is doing with the Ranch, where you're going somewhere and you're having an experience but it's physical, right? And then you've got your digital workplace. Look what we're doing right here. We're using a Zoom to do what we're doing here, right? You can use Slack, Teams, Google Meets. I mean, you just go through all the products that have been built and are being built, much less what's going to happen with AI and how that's going to contribute to productivity in digital workplace. And so that has led us to thinking, what if we came up with a new way to think about our business, and we called it WaaS, which is, by the way, moving away from a transactional business model. So if you think about historically brokerage, right, what we do and what still is the primary model, it's really a transactional commission-based model. How is CBRE brokers paid? We're paid by bringing a client, to a building. They do a lease, and then the lease generates a commission, and that commission gets paid, so it's not even our quote client paying us. It's the landlord, it's a third party. And so, you get into, well, what are the incentives there? Is that, not that I mean, that model has worked for a long time. So I'm not casting aspersions on the model, but I'm just saying, in a perfect world, I think the model could be significantly better in terms of aligning incentives and fiduciary relationships with how you monetize. And so that's really what got us into this idea of a subscription model and not a transactional model, right? So in any event, I mean, WaaS again is really building workplace that generate that collaboration and innovation and productivity, those synergies. And so we've thought about it as a subscription model that's customized and tiered into a bundle, right? So you think about subscriptions that are bundled, and you can go to the B2C model and think about an Amazon, right, is probably one of the most well-known, thought of sort of bundled models that started with 2-day delivery and went from there. And now you think about all the content and streaming and music and all the things that are in that model. So obviously our model is not a B2C, it's a B2B model, but it really has sort of 3 cross-functional components. It's got strategy, so think about it as advice, right? It's got service, which is very traditionally part of what CB does, and it has products, both physical products, so think office space, as furniture, I mean, all the things but it also has digital products, right? So those 3 things are built into the model. So you think, oh, maybe think about a wealth manager type model, right? Plus an Apple, right? Apple builds both hardware and software, right? And it has subscriptions. So we're trying to sort of meld together in a B2B sort of way that kind of thinking, and it's tiered, right? So we have what we call standard, premium, and ultimate, and that really just is trying to match to the needs of our client, which are really going to be different. Some people need more, some people need less. It really just depends. And so we just know one size is not going to fit all, right? And so we're really trying to bring strategy and execution together and it removes all the transactional friction, right? And you get everything. So one of the challenges we face in our company is that so often, if we need a consulting assignment, oh, that's an extra thing you need to pay for. Oh, you want to have a labor study. Oh, that's extra, right? That means all these, and so you just get this, I'll just call it friction, product friction. And we're trying to remove that so that you don't, our client, don't have to go all the time. Oh, can I afford that? Who do I got to go internally to get approval from somebody else to do that? So anyway, that's the,
And there's kind of the conflicts of interest. I mean, venture capital, I've thought deeply about, obviously, and I think of the investors. Like you're a limited partner investor in our fund.
Yeah.
So I think of you as the shareholder.
Yep.
I mean, you and me, that's different. We have our own relationship, but I think of the limited partners in a VC fund are the shareholders. And I think of the startups are the clients.
Yeah.
Because the startups have a choice. It's not like, oh, thank you for flying Delta Airlines. You could have flown United or American, and that's the only choices you had. We're like, hey, thank you for taking money from 7BC Venture Capital. You had a million choices.
Yeah.
There was a lot of VCs that could have funded you, would have funded you. So they're like the clients. When you're dealing with the old model of CBRE, where you're brokering, you're helping our startup go into a 10,000 square foot facility, and then maybe just a couple months later they need another 20,000 square feet, and that could be a big distraction from the team if they don't know you and your team, and they're not all in the Bay Area. Thank God they're moving to other more sensible parts of the world to live in. That when you go from being purely transactional and, oh, this other thing is going to cost you as a study, and you can get them on a subscription that meets their size, it actually does really remove what could have been, perceived to be conflicts of interest. And you're talking the startup into fitting the needs of the landlord, right? Like, you don't want to be, forcing them to eat meat when they should be vegetarian, because the landlord has got meat and no veg that anybody was going to eat there. So I think that is a major shift. That's a major shift.
Yeah, it really, I'm laughing because I so relate to it. And you think about the needs of a fast moving technology startup company that maybe is 500 to 1,000 people or wherever they are, right? Even smaller. And the landlord what is the landlord looking for? The landlord's looking for long lease term. Yeah. Take as much space as possible at the highest rental rates. And that's how.
And lock it in. Lock it in
long, right? And that's how those three ingredients is what drives the fee that gets paid to the broker. And that is
the broker's motivated. The broker's motivation is clearly aligned with the landlord and is in conflict with we're either going to go down or up, there's no staying the same.
Yep. And so this is really trying to go, are those the right answers? Lots of space, long lease term, at high rental rates. Maybe if you're, you need to be in New York City or in San Francisco in that one particular building or whatever. But in most cases, it's like, no, actually, I need to be a lot more agile. I need more of a hospitality model where I'm renting the room for the night or the week, and I don't need a 30-year mortgage. I mean, I get that a 30-year mortgage is cheaper per night than if I'm at the St. Regis for the night, but I'm not sure I want to buy a 30-year mortgage because I don't know how long I'm going to be here. Right. I mean, that's kind of a way to think about it.
Also, the financial compensation plan of the sales team of a company is more important than most people would think. I really saw this up close. This will show you how old I am. That at IBM, you had IBM salespeople were selling the mainframe, with COBOL, and then they were selling a maintenance contract on that they got a commission on. They had the same salespeople being told to sell the AIX RISC chip Unix workstation. So there was the IBM AIX box competing with Sun, like running Solaris, HPUX, Silicon Graphics, SGI, Jim Clark. And these guys were like, hey, you know, we've been told, rah, you should buy these AIX boxes because if you network them together, they're more powerful than the mainframe. But let's be honest, buy the mainframe because damn it, my daughter needs braces. And I need to pay for the lift tickets to go skiing with Dan Harvey in Tahoe. And the amount of money I get paid on a commission on selling these AIX boxes is nothing compared to there's nothing safer than the mainframe. Let's go back to why we love the cloud-based mainframe. And as a result, the sales team was not really pushing their ability as a company to migrate from mainframe to being Sun Microsystems, you know? And so they didn't even put up a fight. So it was easy for Sun to take over from IBM when IBM was basically giving the wrong compensation plan to their sales team. And if you think about that for CBRE and your competitors, most people are just saying, hey, I get paid, you know, if you do what you shouldn't do, which is lock in the highest possible square foot rate for the longest period of time possible. Is that what the, you know, so you're actually killing yourself by compensating the team to do what is not going to win the customer in a post-COVID world of some are from home, some are decentralized. They need more agility than ever. And in fact, they need all this other stuff that's not actually square footage.
Yeah, you put your finger right on the and it's a classic problem. But by the way, totally get the salesperson. I mean, just follow just follow the money, follow the P&L of the person, and yeah, we're all human beings, right? We all are human beings with Paleolithic emotions, meaning, you know, we're going to be focused on what's in our interest. So part of what we're trying to do is set up a structure where the incentives are aligned with what our clients really want, and maybe that's not the mainframe, right? Maybe that is the and so, you know, you can, you know, another good example, look at you know, Reed Hastings and Netflix, right? The moving from, I mean, he disrupted Blockbuster with mailing DVDs, and then he realized, oh my gosh, the future is streaming, and the, you know, the leadership that wanted to, it was responsible for owning the DVD business wasn't happy with the streaming side because that was going to disrupt what they were doing. So these are challenging things for companies, and that's why I think it's just amazing that, you know, CB is hey, let's start experimenting with some of these other business models, even though there are some, you know, it in some ways challenges the existing business model, and so that's what's exciting about what we're you know, trying to do. And, you know, we're building our minimum viable product, and we're doing some test market fits, and we're excited about it because, you know, I just think the future of the world is going to be a lot more agile and a lot more, you know, liquid, if you will, and Workplace needs to, you know, have the right dosings of longer term fixed space and shorter term spaces and digital space, and including, you know, the metaverse. Who knows where that'll sort out? But I mean, you know, there's a whole another workplace that could sit in a particular way. So, you know, these are all the things that WaaS is trying to explore with clients around what are the right dosings and titrations of those workplaces that drive. And you've heard me talk about, you know, productivity, innovation, and collaboration. So our little acronym is PIC, PIC, because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about driving those, and it's about understanding what the metrics of PIC are, right? What is productivity actually? And it's going to be different for different companies, right? What are the metrics? How do you measure productivity? How do you measure?
And how are you measuring it? I mean, there's, you know, the old school is revenue per employee, right?
Yeah, and I think revenue per employee
or EBITDA per employee, maybe
can be over a period of time. I mean, I think can be still as a relevant metric, but I think it's not very good in a short window, right? Because there's so many other exogenous factors, right? I mean, think about if you looked at revenue per employee, you know, in 2018, and then you look at revenue per employee, you know, coming into where we're at now, is that still a good metric of productivity that has anything to do with the individual talent? Maybe, but maybe really not. There's other drivers. So anyway, but that's one. I mean, I think, you can look at, for an engineer, what's the amount of code that is being written, and is that code being written, in a asynchronous digital workplace, or is it being written, physically in person, with a team that's synchronous, right? And looking at those. So a lot of what WaaS is, Andrew, it's about, first of all, acknowledging we don't have the answers, right? I mean, my clients don't need more options. My clients need confidence in the options that are out there and how to assemble them. And you don't get to that confidence without doing some, I'll just call it science experiments, right? I mean, one of my clients, Stripe, what I love about them is their science mindedness to, I mean, if they weren't a fintech company, I would swear they're a life science company, just because of the way in which they think about testing things, right? Try this, try that, isolate and figure out what's actually, driving a behavior or an outcome. So a lot of what WaaS is about setting up experiments, different teams experimenting with different ways they're working, right? And then creating data and a data lake that you can then begin to get meaning out of, right? And visualizing that. And WaaS is very much cross-functional, right? It's not just, the real estate team. It's the CHRO, it's the COO, it's the the founder, the CEO, and it's the CFO. So it's really an executive leadership, cross-functional mindset, right? And looking at having that matriculate through the workplaces that get set up. So we're really about doing experiments with different kinds of workplaces and measuring the pick, right? The productivity, the innovation, and the collaboration over time, right? And so, how do we do that? We do that by, we embed what we call a YODA, right? So what we call strategic talent. And so, rather than maybe onboard full time that person, this gets back to EBITDA and margin, let us embed in your company a YODA. And that may be, you may need that person 10 or 15 hours a week, as opposed to, I need to hire a full-time person. And by the way, good luck finding our YODA out there.
Yeah. Well,
for a company of 500 people.
This is what goes back to a lot of times when I'm looking at startups that we're already in, or to invest in, or how to make introductions to clients for them. I'm thinking, look, the software was built by a guru who understands this better than anyone. So she was born to make this startup because she comes from that industry. And now the software is automating human workflows and tapping into data sets. So it does things that humans cannot do, but it definitely replaces this many people or even one person. And if you think of like a chief people officer or head of HR, I don't know what these guys call themselves these days, but I think that's the function of, do you need to hire this person full time? How many employees do you have before you're able to hire a YODA? And is it frankly cheaper and more efficient to outsource this to a team that's got the perspective of the experiments that are winning or failing at Stripe, and then being able to see, these guys are at Goldman Sachs, come to the office 5 days a week, or else we're going to whip you to death and kill you, fire you. Or this is a work from home forever, engineer led from the top culture that can't believe they ever wasted money on office space to begin with. Right?
Yeah.
So they'll be different. They'll be different.
Yeah. And to take two, I'll say extremes, but I want to say this, like no right or wrong answers, but yeah, you take a Wall Street company that, it may be a JP Morgan or a Goldman Sachs or whatever, that's saying, look, we really want you in the office. That's not the wrong answer. It's like, that's culturally right. Versus a Airbnb, where Brian Chesky has said, we are remote first. It's not that they're getting out of all their office space. No, but it's really different in terms of, and they're different businesses, right? And they're both learning, by the way. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that a year or a year and a half from now, Brian looks at things differently than maybe how and Jamie Dimon looks at things differently. I don't know, but we're all going through this sort of experiment of what works for a particular culture and a particular kind of pick, productivity, innovation, and culture. So for us, it's really about looking at that. And then the other thing I think that's really important is bringing labor and labor analytics to the table in a really powerful way. Because, well, I mean, you just pointed to it. Technology and software and digital workplace has allowed workforce to decentralize, right? To leave these, these amazing Elysium cities. I mean, I'm in San Francisco. I love San Francisco. But does everybody need to be? I mean, you've seen so many people exit San Francisco for whatever their reasons are, right? And I mean, you're in Austin. People moved all over, Chicago, London, New York City, these Elysium cities, which are still amazing places. But you can now, be a Google engineer and take a very high level of pay and be somewhere else for whatever your reasons are. That's not changing. Like decentralization of talent, it's part of what we're a country of immigrants. We immigrated from Europe to here. People are going to immigrate from cities to other places and back and forth. You're going to still people are going to want to be in an amazing city like San Francisco. Of course they are, but there is definitely technology is allowing decentralization of talent, and we just have to acknowledge it's happening. It's happened, and it's happening, right? So part of what we're looking at is the labor piece of it, the cost of that labor. Where is that labor? What's the depth of that labor? How many people are competing for that labor, right? So that you as a particularly as a scaling company that's a village size moving to city size, right? Like villages being 100 to 1,000 and cities being 1,000 to 10,000. I mean, just picking those metrics. Where do I want to be given who I'm competing with and the talent I need? So a lot of it is around labor and really looking at where it is.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you've got a couple of different moving parts of you've got are we a Apple Goldman, you got to come into the office culture, or are we a what was Twitter, work from home forever culture? But then you've got the individual. Like I remember when my twin boys were born, I stopped having meetings in my apartment. I mean, it was a war zone. It was like Hamburger Hill there. It was rough.
Right.
So it was very rough. So I was like, take me to the office.
Yeah.
And in fact, how about an airplane? But now my kids are older. I have lots of meetings in my house and events in my house, and working from home is not the end of the world. But there's and then there's, are you at the beginning of your career where I think you're probably better off being in the office or physically around people as much as possible. And then you get older and you're just overbooked, that if I can avoid looking for a parking space in Palo Alto for 5 minutes, that's a win for me.
Yep.
At the same time, I'm happy these days. I'm a transplant from Silicon Valley to Austin, Texas, as you know, but I'm in California every month. I just got back from Seattle. I travel all over the place. I kind of like the 50% in person, totally physical in person, and then crank from home, as much. And then so there's the company, you're kind of A or B, or on the continuum from left to right. Then there's the individual of where are you from being early or some asteroid event like twins showing up in the house. And then there's the whole evolution of the COVID. Like, what's culturally acceptable? Casual Fridays anymore becomes permanent. It used to be summer only when I started, right? So the whole place is evolving. So doing our kind of 18-month, almost 2 years later check-in after the asteroid of March, April lockdowns in 2020, when we first did the podcast together here. What are you seeing now? I mean, like I've heard, one of my LPs works for Bank of America in San Francisco. He lives in Oakland. And he told me a while ago, they told us to come into the office or you're fired. So I get on BART, which he hates, goes into San Francisco and said there was nobody there and they only had one food choice. What are you kidding? And so he doesn't want to go back into the office again, was his reaction. What are you seeing in the market right now? Oh shit. Dan, our Wi-Fi is frozen. Christ.
You're frozen.
Yeah, we're gonna have to rewind. Okay, we're still recording. All right. Yeah, this is a work from home snafu. My wife's even been calling Spectrum with our bandwidth. So let's see, where can we rewind? Okay, here.
We're talking about your friend from Bank of America, or your investor from Bank of America.
Right.
If that helps, like calibrate. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start again. I mean, one of my LPs in San Francisco works for Bank of America, lives in Oakland, and they told him, COVID is over. You've got to come into the office every day or you're fired. Or you have to come in at least 2 days a week, something like that. And he takes Bart into the city, which he hates, and was complaining there was nobody there and there was only one food choice. So to hell with them telling me I'm fired. I'm not going to be the only guy who comes in. And he was quite annoyed. What are you seeing right now in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, around the world? Like, where are we in, what's happening? People have to go to the office now. I realize there's a lot of variance, but maybe give us a bit of an update from your vantage point.
Yeah, I would say San Francisco, just to start with San Francisco specifically, is probably the least return to office city, certainly in the U.S., and it's probably you can extend it beyond that in terms of one, just culturally. If you think about San Francisco, it's culturally Web 2 and Web 3. So it just does not have the same sort of declarative statements being made by the leaders of these companies that, let's say, a New York City might have, right, with the finance piece. So your friends or your investors experience, I think, is spot on with what I'm experiencing, what I'm seeing now. With that said, there clearly is more, particularly in the neighborhoods. Okay, in the San Francisco neighborhoods, you think of Mission, the Mission District, or Noe Valley, or pick North Beach. Those are very different in terms of what I call sort of the vibrancy. The Central Business District continues to have a struggle with just the amount of traffic to support
right,
the retail, right? If you just think about what you were,
the restaurants that we
all that
where
sort
you
of
and
stuff.
I would be having lunch.
Exactly. So that is going to be, I think, San Francisco specifically is going to have increasing challenges. If you just think about its tax base and that comes from retail sales, but also its real estate tax base. If you think about all the taxes that are raised from these office buildings, right, the annual taxes, and if the valuation of those buildings become materially diminished because of what's happening with less people just needing less office space over time, those are real challenges that the city, and it's not just San Francisco. I mean, there's a lot of stories and thinking and math being run in New York City, Chicago, San Francisco.
Seattle is competitive.
Absolutely.
SF for we're they're
Yep.
literally safe.
Portland. I mean, you think about cities that are probably the least return to office. It would be San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, for sure.
Yes.
So, I mean, part of what we're trying to do with WaaS is, if you think about it, I was talking to a client the other day, and they were saying, when I wake up, the first question I'm not asking myself is, where should I work? I'm asking myself, what am I doing today to be productive, to collaborate with my team, and if I have an innovation job, to be innovating, right? It's what am I doing, right? And who am I doing it with? And part of being distributed is knowing what your team's doing and where they are. And it's not until maybe question number 5 or 6 do you go, okay, where am I doing that? Which, it used to be that was just, oh, I'm jumping on BART, I'm in Oakland, and I'm going to the city, and that's just fundamentally not happening. And so one of the things we're trying to build into and have built into to WaaS is creating awareness of where your team is, right? And so you can decide, am I gonna synchronously get together in real life, right? Or am I going to synchronously get together like this on a Zoom? And part of it is going, well, what's my team? What are my peeps doing? Oh, if I knew Andrew was in and Julie was in, I mean, I wasn't planning to come in on Wednesday, but guess what? They're coming in. It's a really good opportunity for me to collaborate, because I mean, how many of us wake up and go, oh, I'm going to randomly come into the office today because I may randomly run into someone, a novel someone. I mean, yeah, in the Harvard think tanks and McKinsey, yeah, you think like that existentially, and it's true, but that's not what drives people's behavior. Very few people make decisions based on the existential, I might run into somebody in the office. You think about it much more like, who's going to be there? Oh, that's really meaningful to me. So we're really trying to create that kind of awareness. And by the way, people obviously need, people don't want to come into the office to do email. I mean, or to do deep think. I mean, I'll do that at home, or I'll do that somewhere else, because I don't want the distraction, right? I want to be I'm working asynchronously today, right? So that's also very legitimate in terms of, so it's trying to create more deliberate awareness of what your peers are doing, so you can decide, how do you get to pick, right? Productivity, innovation, and collaboration.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, just last week I was in Seattle and we had our own event, and then went to a couple other holiday party events, and just getting people in the same room and coordinating where you're going to be. Then it turned into back-to-back meetings, and some people having a crisis, that it was just hugely important to be aware that we were all going to be in this one guy's office for a few hours, and it turned into a full day of meetings before and after. And then, people coordinating who's driving you to get a meeting with you in the car, just going from one spot to another.
Yeah.
So it was a huge spike in pick, I would think, from around, a couple of days of being up there, and then word spreading around of who's where.
Yep.
And it was me bringing my Seattle LPs together with our Seattle CEOs and founders. Yep. That was the ultimate, productivity, innovation, collaboration.
So it's such a great example. So one of our, components of the subscription we're building in is that there's a company called Flexi.ai, and these guys are amazing. So think about your Outlook or your Google Calendar. Think about sort of Slack and Kali, like all these different sort of that help you. It's taking all of that, and it's bringing that together so you can team, right? Because it's not, you don't necessarily care if you're in engineering, you don't necessarily care what the sales guys or gals are doing, or what, maybe you do, maybe, I mean, you can friend that peep. You can go, look, if that person's in, I want to know, or if my team leader or my executive's in, I want to know, even though I may not be directly interacting with them, but if they're there, that'd be good to know. But for the people that I really, and so Flexi is part of the subscription that really helps drive that awareness, right? So again, if I go to the Amazon model, I mean, CB doesn't have everything. And so we're reaching out and bringing like a Flexi as part of the subscription, right? So I just want to be sure that I'm spotlighting them as an example, right? Of partners that are helping us, because we can't do it all, right? I mean, CB doesn't have every answer.
Well, you have the unique perspective. So to wrap us up, Dan, what does the future of workplace look like? What, will the next Google, Facebook, Meta be born in this new centralized, decentralized, hybrid technology, bits and atoms coming together?
Well, I'm hoping they're in your portfolio. I've invested in
Me
them.
too.
I can just put my own self-interest out there, but I absolutely think that in this moment, the next Google is being born, right? And you add it with, like, I was just listening to things about what OpenAI is doing, right? And Sam Altman. I mean, I just think it's incredible. So when you think about the SaaS model, you think about OpenAI, you think about this increasingly decentralized workforce. I don't think it's going back the other way. I really don't. And so I sort of now think of workplace is really wherever workforce is. That's it. I mean, it's almost like you can almost think of workplace as just consciousness. It's just, everything happens in your consciousness, but you don't think about consciousness. It just happens there, right? And that's kind of how I'm thinking about workplace.
And you guys were always positioned to support people internationally, but how much do you see people not just moving from San Francisco to San Diego, but from San Francisco to Cabo, Mexico? Or how beyond the U.S. border are you seeing things these days?
A lot. I mean, when we do, I mean, both in terms of, I'll call it immigration, like people leaving a San Francisco or leaving in New York to go be in a London, or go be in South America, or go wherever that might be, go be in a Singapore, or go for sure. Absolutely. I mean, Airbnb is another great example where so much of that workforce has culturally chosen to be nomadian, right? They're spending 3 months
Right.
here, 6 months there, 2 months, right? Very purposefully, right? And obviously their business model, that's very much in alignment with their business model. So I want to be sure to be clear about that. That's not going to work for every company, but it's an interesting use case, right? And then it's okay, where is the labor that's already existing internationally, right? Whether that's Europe, whether that's South America, whether that's Mexico. I mean, we're now seeing so much concern about supply chain with what's happening in China. I mean, you just look at what Apple's doing relative to manufacturing. And that is a really huge concern of our clients, is being sure whether it's, I'm building a product, that requires a physical or it's knowledge work, but where is it sitting, and what are the politics and the culture of that country that's going to be sure that my workforce is durable, right, and can be productive, back to pick. So yeah.
Well, Dan, and I assume you're available to talk to startups even if they're not in our portfolio, right? So if startups want to reach out to you and get a view of a customized workplace as a service, WaaS, what's the best way for them to reach you? And I'll put it in the show notes, of course.
Yeah, well, the best place to reach me, you can reach me on LinkedIn, right? And then you can also, I'll give you my email address, which is just dan.harvey@cbre.com, and they can email me there. But between LinkedIn and that is probably the best ways to reach me. And I'd love to talk with founders and as they're scaling and growing, and have them think about these things, because I think it can really not only help offensively them grow, but really grow with margin, grow with EBITDA. I mean, look, you're looking so hard at that right now. It's about profitable growth, not just growth. So that's what we're trying to really be, a force for good, in a force multiplier around that equation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're entering a new moment in startup Silicon Valley culture and history where it's not just sell $1 for 50 cents of revenue.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to see that come to an end.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, my man. Listen, thanks. Great to see you. And
thank you.
Catch up in person soon.
Very much appreciated. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye for now.
Well, that was certainly interesting. It's Mark DiTargiani with Pacific Western Bank back here. Again, really excited to be part of the podcast with 7BC and Andrew. And we're excited just to support the ecosystem and help you get to whatever your next step is in your business journey. Thank you very much.